Hello, creative friends. This is Joy. So I am continuing with this series of using up scraps that I had left over from making a bunch of journals. And so with these little pieces, I decided that I could make little mini envelopes and cards to use in the journals. And here I'm just trying to mark the center of the square, and then I fold in on both sides, and then fold the bottom up. And at first I figured, well, I will, trim off that piece that sticks up. But then I decided that it worked better just to fold it down. And here I'm just cutting off the corners where the paper was going to be bulkier. And so, yeah, I tried to trim off, but then I didn't like the way that it looked, and so I folded it over, and that seemed to give a better edge. So for the rest of them, I just folded it over. And then I folded the top down, and again I trimmed off the corners where it was had excess paper and was going to cause some bulk there. And then I glued down that little flap, and then put glue on both of the side pieces and the bottom piece, and closed it up. Went a little too far with the glue there. So then I thought, well, what am I going to put in these little envelopes, And so I thought, well, I could use some of the paper to put like a little card in the envelope. So I measure the size of the envelope, and I figure if I get a coordinating piece of paper and fold it, I could put it in there. So I measured the envelope to see what the size of it was, and then I cut it down to size. And that's what, I ended up making, is a little envelope with like a card inside, so I could pull it out and write something on it. So I decided to take the rest of these pieces and see which ones coordinated, so I could use one piece for the card and one for the envelope. So that's what I'm doing here. Just trying to mix and match to see what goes together, and then continue to make the envelopes and cards. Again, I marked the middle, and I guess I didn't have to do this part, but know myself, and if I didn't at least try to be a little more precise with it, these envelopes would have turned out super wonky. I don't think I would have been able to fold them up as nicely. So I folded in, marked the center, folded in each side, folded the bottom up, folded down that little triangle there. Folded the top down. Once I figured out what I was doing, and it was easier, and I used my awl to kind of get the crisp corners. I opened it up and then cut off any excess on the corners that was going to cause bulk or it not to fold up nicely. Glue down the little flap, glue down the sides. And then again, just measured and made my little card to go inside. So all in all, I ended up making 10 of these to use in the journals. I think they're going to make a really cute addition to the journals. I haven't decided how I'm going to put them in the journals yet, or where, if I'm going to put them in a pocket or just glue them into, on on a journal page, or what else, how I'm going to use them. But I figured, well, I'm just going to, right now, just make a bunch of ephemera, and I'll figure out later, when I go to actually use these in the journal, how I'm going to use them. So one more time, mark the center, fold in the sides, fold up the bottom, fold down that one flap, that one corner, fold the top, and make sure I get like a crisp fold on the corners, open up, cut any excess off the corners. And then glue everything down. And then take the coordinating piece of paper that I chose to go with this card, or this envelope, to make the card. To go in it. So here are the ones that I've made so far. Little envelopes with little matching, or coordinating cards. And like I said, all in all, as I'm going through using up these scraps, I did end up finding more scraps that I was able to make more envelopes and cards, and I ended up making about 10 of them. So then with these pieces of scraps, I thought these would probably work good with making specimen cards. So first thing I do is fold them in half, which I think, makes them the perfect size for specimen cards. And I've got a little square die out of my stash that I'm going to use to cut the window in these cards. So I fold all of the pieces of paper in half. And these turned out really cute. I was really happy with the way these turned out. I could have probably skipped through some of this part. It's just folding them in half. I have this Gemini die cut machine, little mini. I thought, well, this will work. So I put my card, one of the cards on there, put the die on there as centered as possible towards the top. So I have about the same amount on the sides and the top, and then cut out the center. And I save those little pieces for use later on for other ephemera. Like I said, I'm just trying to use up all these scraps that were left over from making all those journals that I made, instead of adding more scraps to my stash. So I was going to use double-sided tape, but it was not wide enough, so I got these laminating sheets that I thought, well, this will work. So I'm trying to figure out the size of these cards to see what size I need to cut the laminating sheet down to. And so I'm measuring the length of the laminating sheet, because I'm like, I could probably get quite a few out of this. And then I start cutting. So I cut the height, and then, the height, and then I cut the width, and I end up probably with like 6 or 8 pieces. And the little pieces that are left over, I actually save and use for another project coming up later on. Again, I'm just trying to use up as many scraps as I can. So here I had some dried flowers and leaves that I wanted to use, and I pulled the laminating sheet off the backing and then laid it on top, face up, with the sticky side up on top of the backing so I could see, where it's at and what's going on. And I pick out a leaf, a couple leaves that I wanted to use. And position those on the backing. And a little piece came off, I guess, so I'm trying to put back on there. And then I pull out some flowers, and I'll show you several different ways that I made these cards. And here I'm just using dried flowers, which is one way. But I'll show you here in a minute several other ways if you don't have any dried flowers. And I just bought these dried flowers off of Amazon. I searched Amazon and found a couple of places that had, where you can buy the dried flowers already dried, or you can dry them yourself, either way. Then I take another piece of laminating sheet and I put it on top. So I've got the dried flowers sandwiched between two pieces of laminating sheets. So then I trimmed off any excess where they didn't match up and there was some stickiness. And then I took one of the windows and I just put it in there and just tested it to see how it fit. And then took my glue and then glued around and then laid it in there in the window. Put glue on the other side and then closed it up. And there you go, that's one of them. And you'll see here in a little bit how I continue to decorate these. Now the next one, I just have these stickers that are floral stickers. It's like washi tape stickers, so they're kind of, thin, see-through. And so I decided to use some with these washi tape stickers of florals. So I'm making sure that the one that I got is actually going to work in the window, because some of them were kind of big and would be a little too big. And then trying to place the sticker on there in an appropriate place where it will show through the window. Take on another laminating sheet, put that on top, and sandwich that between two laminating sheets. Trim off any excess. Then take one of the windows and find one, that I think will work. Put glue around the frame. And I really like that I made these laminating sheets the same size as the card, because then it gives sturdiness. The scrapbook paper that was left over is actually kind of thin. It wasn't a thicker type of cardstock or scrapbook paper, and so it really added some thickness to these cards. So rather than just making it just big enough to go in the window, I actually made it, to where it's the same size as the whole card. And I trim off, there's a little bit sticking out the bottom, so I had to trim that off. And then another way that I made some of these, and you'll see I made quite a few, and I'll show you at the end. What I made is these butterfly stickers. So I'm trying to decide which butterfly I want to put on this particular frame, in this frame. Pull off the laminating sheet, turn it upside down, And I use my tools to kind of move it around and get it straight on there. Get the butterfly I want to put on here. I lay it down face down because I want to be able to see it from either side. Take the same one, matching one, lay it on top, and then add the other laminating sheet. So that way, whichever side that you look at it, you'll see the butterfly, and then glue that down. So that's the 3 different ways that I use to make specimen cards, and then I'll show you here in just a minute after I get this glued down on both sides how I proceeded to decorate them. So I have these, this is a Tim Holtz stamp set, and I just stamped a bunch of these on cream and craft cardstock and then cut them out. And I just go through and decide, and I cut them all out, all these little pieces. And so now I'm going through and deciding what I want to put on these cards. And this is how I proceeded or went about decorating all of the specimen cards that I made. And so then once I decided to, what more I wanted to put on these cards. And here I'm just trimming up because when I cut these out, I just some of them came out a little wonky. So I'm just trying to trim them up a little bit to make them a little straighter and neater, I guess. And at the top, I wanted it to fit in that little space, so I did have to trim it a little closer. So yeah, this is something that you can do ahead of time, which I did with these. I'm like, if I don't stamp these and cut them up, I'm never going to use them. So I thought, well, you just need to stamp a bunch of them, cut them up, and then you have them. And then I glue everything down once I decide on what I want to put on each card. I really like the craft on these cards. I tried the cream on a couple of them, but I really like the way the craft looked on these cards. And I could have just taken the stamp sets and just stamped directly on the cards, but yeah, I like the way these turned out. I was happy with them. And you'll see I end up, even pulling out some other things to use on some of these cards. I have these little mini tags I've had for ages. I don't even remember where I got them from. And I got to thinking, oh, I could use maybe some of the mini tags on some of these with some brads, which you'll see that here in just a minute. So that's how I go about decorating the cards, just adding stuff on there, and then I decide to ink the edges. So I'm just showing you with some distressed ink just to go around the edges and ink them. And then here's the other ones I did with stickers, and you can see their little tag at the top with a brad on that mushroom sticker, and on some of the others with some more dried flowers, some more stickers. And I guess I didn't ink that one, or didn't ink it well enough, so I'm inking it. I did a feather there and some more stickers. So I thank you for stopping by and watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.